dear friends, it's such an honor and so inspiring to be here in Tallinn today. I've had over the years presentations in Estonia that when I look back to the decades during which they've taken place, they do stand out because of certain emotional tone that basically hits me when I come here. Basically, trying to rationalize that, I think it's for two reasons. One reason is that when my public life in Finland started, there was an event that Teachers Association for the Finnish language had organized. So they had invited me to speak there as a so-called punk doctor. This was 1980. And the participant of that seminar with his Lada was Lennart Meri. So I met Lennart Meri in 1980 for the first time. Another reason for the certain emotional tone is that, and let's see if I can say this, was due to the fact that my mother thought that the greatest song and performance of that song is Saaremaa Valssi by Georg Ots. And she especially, of course, she listened to it in the Finnish version. She particularly liked the ending where the soldier doesn't get the lady because the first day that my father had met her made my father be absolutely excited of her. And my father immediately tried to get the results, but he wasn't successful. So after 80 years, my mother was very sort of delighted by that feat of hers. Now, as a philosopher, it's relatively easy for me to sort of think in terms of thoughts. So you could say, well, probably some thoughts are better than some other thoughts, from the point of view of living a life on the basis of that thought. So now sometimes the better thought is a result of, for instance, you being informed of something you didn't know. So as a result, you come to know something. And your thoughts are different because you base your thinking on the basis of something you didn't know. Also, it could be that somebody challenges you, with the result that you start to think something you wouldn't have thought had you not been criticized with your previous thought or prevailing thought up until that. And you say, well, that's of course the basic academic approach that you sort of try to influence, as it were, the cognitive basis of somebody's thoughts. But I think that maybe we could look at source for constructive thoughts, important thoughts, better life-generating thoughts, also from some other areas. So, for instance, if I think about me giving a presentation, and me even to think about the option which I this time couldn't do because I came so late yesterday, was that at least I could think I would do what I have done so many times before, which is to go to the grave of Lennart Meri. But because I couldn't do it, I can still think about it. But I believe that the fact that I do think about it somehow makes better life in the context of giving this presentation than if I hadn't thought about the thought. Now this case of thinking a thought that leads to better life, I think is particularly interesting if we grant the fact, and I think it is a fact, that we as human beings, we have various features. For instance, we breathe, and we circulate blood. You can't be a human being if you don't breathe. Now, I would say that there's also this feature of us, which is a fact. It's not a philosophy, it's not a vision. I don't think it's an opinion, it's just a fact that there's something in you that is good that for whatever reason hasn't come out. Now, if we assume that something would exist, that you say, well, couldn't you at least sort of think about the possibility? So connecting these two would be something that, from my point of view, would seem like a beneficial starting point. And from that starting point, think about the following. And now it seems at first I step aside from the line of thought I just outlined, but please follow me with this. I think my mother was 91 at the time when she was at our place in Helsinki. At the time, she still lived in where she has lived all her life, in Hyvinkää, in that house that my grandfather had built. She lived there alone after my father had died. But she was now in Helsinki at our place for a dentist operation the next morning. So she was for an overnight visit to our place in Helsinki. But when she was visiting us, she never wanted that to cause any kind of fuss. So she just wanted everything to continue business as usual. But in the evening, it occurred to me that she hasn't been to sauna after that terrible accident at our summer place when she fell against the oven in the sauna at our summer place. And her arm was badly burned. It was absolutely horrendous. But of course, the medical science and medical profession has developed tremendously, you could say miraculously. So after, I think maybe 3 months or so of various kinds of efforts and treatments, basically her arm became the same as it used to be. But I realized now that she was at our place that she hasn't been to sauna, and all her life she has loved sauna. And we have this little city sauna at our place. So I said to my mother in the evening, would you like to go to sauna? And sure enough, she said that would be wonderful, using the Finnish expression ihana, which is sort of wonderfully wonderful. So I mean, the tone of the word is so beautiful. It's always ihanaa. You were wonderfully wonderful. And then we went to our little city sauna. We have twin boys, Pips and me. So in the old days, the whole family would fit in, but nowadays basically it just takes 2 persons. But it's a nice little sauna, so there we are with my mother, and I'm throwing some water on the stones, and it's just one mother and one son in the sauna. And then we come out, and as we come out, I said, would you like me to wash your hair? And my mother said, se olisi ihanaa. That would be wonderfully wonderful. And then I started to wash the hair of my mother. I remember thinking, is she really so small? I mean, I was sort of astonished by the fact that she was so small. I mean, is it possible that our mother is so small, but she was small? It turned out. So this thought sort of struck me regarding the size of my mother as I washed her hair. Okay, then the hair was washed and we came out from the sauna. Now, reflecting back the last, let's say, 10 years, before my retirement from Aalto University, there is a mandatory age of 68. But before my mandatory retirement, I got so-called Aalto Act of the Year award. This is basically the highest award you can get, appreciation of your efforts that somebody can get at our university. And of course, when you get peer recognition, it's so beautiful. Like that applause for Maria in the beginning. It's so beautiful. You sort of hear the honesty. And I think it feels good for anybody to sort of be part of that kind of a thought of appreciation. So I was extremely touched by this Aalto Act of the Year award that related to my philosophy and systems thinking course, which I had done every spring since 2001, and had become sort of an event also through its video and podcast formats. So I was very touched by that recognition. But if I'm asked, which one would you choose, the Aalto Act of the Year award, or that one time with your mother, Esa, in your sauna, which now that you look back was the last time you were in sauna with your mother. In fact, it was the last time that your mother was at your place. It would be an easy choice. But looking back, of course, I sort of see that moment just before making the question, would you like to go to sauna? That moment of, you could say, a potentially unthought thought. Because I remember that split-second moment when I realized that if I ask her the question, would you like to go to sauna? For sure she will say she'd like to go to the sauna because all her life she has loved sauna, but she hasn't been to sauna since that incident. However, if I don't bring the theme up, she won't bring it up because she doesn't want to create any kind of extra trouble. However, if I do raise the possibility, it means that if we then go to sauna, as we will go to sauna, as I trigger that course of events with that thought, I won't be able to do the certain things I had planned to do in the course of that evening. I mean, Pipsa and me as a couple me as a professional, we live very exciting lives. All kinds of things are all the time happening. All kinds of invitations, all kinds of possibilities emerge every day. And of course, there are all kinds of things you can do in order to push forward many of the causes I believe in. So many of the things I try to do in my life professionally, from my point of view, are important courses of action I want to contribute to. So there's always something I could do and I want to do. So of course, I had thought that I would handle certain things, check some emails, WhatsApp messages, all kinds of things in the evening, but that would be in jeopardy if we go to sauna with my mother. So you could say that this sort of black hole of tasks, sort of ontologically speaking, was quite clearly there, forming, as it were, a field of gravitation. So I felt I'm pulled towards that thought-wise. So although the thought of my mother and me in the sauna, when you place it in context, where thinking, of course, ultimately always takes place, context of time. You could say, when you think about it sort of calmly, would indicate that, well, if she is 91, probably, even if nothing that striking happens, you won't have that many chances of going to sauna with your mother. I mean, one didn't know that, let's say, COVID kind of thing would all of a sudden grab us. And it would be impossible even to meet the person. Or if you would meet the person, you would have to have some kind of special arrangement to the effect that if you would, let's say, sing, as I did do, Saarenmaan valssi, with her lying on the couch, it would be more difficult for you with your lips to indicate where you are in the song, because your lips wouldn't be in sight. So all that wasn't there to be seen, but of course you could have thought about the possibility that maybe this is more rare as an opportunity than you would, as it were, automatically think. So the thought of an unthought thought, the logic of which is not one that you would stumble upon on the basis of new knowledge, on the basis of somebody criticizing you with your prevailing views, but because you sort of somehow allow yourself to think about it. It's particularly interesting, should it be that there's something that comes out or creeps from the margins, would turn out to be important from your point of view when you reflect upon it. I mean, surely some of those thoughts that you could think and do exist in the margins of your thinking de facto are more important than others. It's possible that some of those thoughts that you have pushed to the margins are not that essential even when you think about it, but it's also possible that some of those thoughts are essential when you think about it, but you don't think about it. So this is, from my point of view, a case for thinking of one's thinking, and for recognizing the fact that it could be that some of those thoughts that remain de facto unthought, because you don't think of your thinking, relate to some of those hidden, whatever they might be, aspects of you, in particular regarding other people and the life itself, that might bring out something that is hiding at the current time from those others. So it's in this context of an unthought thought that I hope this little presentation of mine would create, as it were, a context for you to relate to those thoughts. Because remember that in many contexts where you are cultivating your thinking are ones that are different from the one in which we are now find ourselves at. For instance, because of the fact that it could be, let's say, a professional seminar. Let's say it's a board meeting. So the point of the board meeting is that we here exchange ideas. So everybody is being challenged regarding his or her views on something. So you operate with thoughts. And the idea is that collectively we come up with unthought thoughts that would be absolutely crucial if we really want to move forward. But from your point of view, it's a moment of being challenged, a moment of being at the risk of somehow embarrassing yourself in front of others. So some of those unthought thoughts have this kind of logic or threat of somehow embarrassing you, that you hadn't thought about it. Now, what I have thought about my own lecturing style is that it would be great if the lecture itself would create, as it were, a platform or a space, a situation where the person could reflect upon some of his or her marginalized thoughts that are fundamental when the person thinks about it more carefully, safely. And this, of course, is this safety is not guaranteed, let's say, at the meeting of a board, when professionals are there for this exchange of ideas. Because anybody can challenge you regarding anything at any time. So you need to be smart enough to be able to articulate whatever thought you are talking about sufficiently clearly. But it could be that some of the thoughts that are of particular significance from your point of view are difficult to articulate. So Esa in the boat might feel something. I have a presentation in Estonia tomorrow. Why am I feeling in this kind of particular way? So I might start to articulate it. It's in this kind of context where maybe the following line of thought would be useful. And now it seems that I, again, as it were, change the subject. Please follow me with this. As I said, we have twin boys, Pipsa and me. We've been together 40 years. We have just these two children, the twins, that were born in 89. So they are 35. And it was so incredible when our love started in the early 80s. I mean, I was just absolutely crazy. And I fought so hard to get her, and then I did get her. It was so incredible. Because she's such an enormous human being. And I've gotten so much from her in so many ways. And of course, the birth of our boys is the single most significant event of my life. But of course, in human life, things come with a cost. So there's this other side of the coin. In this case, when our boys were born, it was such a tremendous, miraculous, positive event. But it also meant that I lost my position when it comes to the woman of my life. Because I had been the number one guy up until then. Whereas now I found myself as being the number 3 guy. Probably for the next 20 years or so. Now, I mean, speaking in Formula 1 terms, it wasn't even that I would be the number 2 driver of the team, but I was some kind of test driver. whose name you barely remember. But of course, I did get something from her, just me. For instance, I remember this one Saturday when I said to Pipsa, I think the boys were maybe 10 at the time or so. I said to Pipsa, hey, let's go to the marketplace. It's such a nice weather. I mean, let's go, just the two of us, to the marketplace. I mean, the boys can take care of themselves for a couple of hours. To which Pipsa said, okay, Esa, that's a good idea, but in order to save time, let's go in your car. She doesn't have a driving license. She doesn't drive. She always says, your car. Now, we live on Boulevardi. In the center of Helsinki, we are just a few blocks away from the marketplace. I mean, you could walk the beautiful boulevard and then the Esplanade Street. I mean, this is, you could say, in terms of walking, one of the best urban scenes anybody in Finland can walk on. So from my point of view, it wouldn't be natural to walk, but we have a democracy in the family. Meaning everybody can vote, but only her vote is counted. So now that she has voted for going in the car, what does it mean is that we go in the car. So we come in the car towards the marketplace, and I check for a parking spot on the street Esplanade before the marketplace, and I see this tight spot between two cars. So I evaluate the situation, put the car in the reverse, and take my car to that very, very tight spot with the back first beautifully. You know, one of those masterful parking jobs. Not one of those cases where you try to take your car in and then too late realize it's impossible. Then you have to take your car out, thus humiliating yourself in front of everybody. Not one of those cases, an absolutely outstanding parking job with the back first and the special lady in the car who said, Esa, it's nice to be in your car because you always park so well. I was there with total poker face, but thinking that was pretty good. I mean, if you think about this sort of phenomenon, that something happens, let's say just a phrase, somebody says something happens, but it hits somebody's plus button with the result that the person somehow is from within strengthened because there has been this hit on the plus button. Like in this case, you could say that like Estonia, Finland is a small country, which means that if you grow up in the small country, it's quite likely that your country isn't that outstanding in many of the sports in which you as a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 12-year-old and so forth witness your countrymen doing something. And let's say football. You know, Finns haven't done that well. But there is motorsports in which Estonians have done well, in which Finns have done well. In my case, Finns have done well. I mean, all these great champions, the flying Finns, come to my mind as I myself park so outstandingly, because it's sort of the same theme. This is the way our thinking works. It sort of associates. So one thing comes up and other things follow. So most certainly when I said to my mother, would you like to go to sauna? And then we go to sauna. I didn't think that I would also wash her hair. It just sort of associatively came along. So in the boat yesterday, I didn't actively remember the fact that this was actually my sort of first big presentation in front of a larger audience on non-academic themes, to which Lennart Meri participated, and which also paved the way for the fact that when we then met later on in Paris, it was a different meeting as compared to had there not been that meeting. Also, it made me to sort of think about some of the events that took place afterwards differently, because I had met him. I have sort of felt that presence, that sort of warm curiosity, interest, non-judgmental, while at the same time charismatic. It's a possible thought for somebody to orient somebody. So it's in this kind of associative area where the concept of plus button might be interesting to somebody if somebody would think, let's say, regarding his or her colleagues, let's say regarding his or her spouse. Let's say you have a fine relationship that has lasted for 15 years. So as a wife to somebody, as a husband to somebody, I mean, you could say it's natural for you to think that you know to somebody. But if we ask, can you know to somebody? Can you know the somebody from the point of view of all of the good things that might emerge now? Because of course you've only known the somebody in particular kinds of contexts. So maybe the context could be slightly different, symbolically. Because it could be, for instance, that the person would, for whatever reason, feel a bit more respected by the something that you do, maybe a line you say. I mean, I don't want to be stereotypical in the following claim, but I just sort of think I've observed at least statistically relevant phenomenon in that most women in most relationships I follow closely feel that her husband isn't willing to listen to me quite the way I like him to listen to me. So the lady might feel that she's been superimposed by restrictions regarding the way something she wants to talk about should be talked about. So for instance, Pipsa is constantly, I would say, sometimes irritated, sometimes just sort of frustrated by the fact that I expect her to be more organized in the way she lays out themes. Also, the moment at which she wants to bring up something, from my point of view, often is wrong. So yes, I would be theoretically ready to listen to that, but not now. So you could say, well, that's possible. But from your point of view, as a man in this case, surely I could think that already in advance. And surely everybody have kind of expectations regarding how is the something supposed to be laid out if it's valuable. And I mean, why couldn't she speak exactly like she wants to speak? Why couldn't she do what the late head of and savior of Marimekko, was a good friend of mine, Kirsti Paakkanen, and now of course Tiina Alahuhta-Kasko is carrying the torch so powerfully, having served there under Kirsti and in her team for such a long time. Kirsti once said that, as a woman, I have the right to change my view 3 times in 1 sentence. And you say, well, that's a possible thought. I wouldn't particularly endorse the thought, but surely somebody can have such a thought. But if you're married to the person, you could say, wouldn't you want to support the person in whatever the person is up to? It's a possible view. No, so what I'm here suggesting is that maybe you don't really know where your colleagues' plus buttons are that well. Also, it could be that they're, from your point of view, sort of irrational. I'm of the age that to me these tattoos that you often see in younger generation people, men and women, are sort of, they stand out. Often I don't really I don't know what to think even. I find them slightly puzzling at least. But if I ask a young person politely, non-judgmentally and warmly, like Lennart Meni turned to me as a sort of a young radical guy in Lappeenranta in 1980, he was somehow interested. Although he must have thought that, this guy is so superficial. This guy just believes so much of himself that is not based on anything. But he didn't sort of indicate this. So you turn to this young person that has a tattoo and say, 79. Why do you have there the number 79? With that kind of Lennart Meri kind of warmth. And the person might say, as just happened a couple of weeks ago, that's when my mother was born. She has tattooed the birth year of her mother. Now, if you approach the person in a particular kind of warm respect regarding that kind of tattoo, that in fact refers to the young lady's mother, you could say, you probably hit her plus button. And it's, at least it's a possible thought that you could interact with anybody in this room during a coffee break in such a way that for whatever reason you hit the person's plus button, it's sort of conceivable. You could say, well, probably that reality is more likely if you think about it as a possibility. If you help yourself, if you sort of guide your actual behaviors from the point of view of your plus button, of the other one's plus button, as you return home, you're likely to meet your spouse slightly differently, is the thought here. And if you think about that, let's look at the sort of even deeper aspect of that plus button, you could say dynamism. And this is slightly embarrassing to admit, but occasionally I Google with my own name. And once I was Googling images under the phrase Esa Saarinen, so checking what kind of photographs float around regarding me, and up popped this photograph, which, of course, I hadn't sort of looked at this particular ambulance from this angle, but I recognized the ambulance immediately, realizing that at the time of this photograph, I'm inside the ambulance. Because this is from that occasion just before the philosophy and systems thinking course that at that time took place in the Tripodi building. that had big enough auditorium for the lecture that typically took 600 people. So we had there in Tripodi. But as we approached Tripodi with my assistant, we were approached by a young guy who approached. I remember it was sort of a little bit sort of strange that he came so quickly. He came very quickly towards us, and he had a plastic bag. It was a white plastic bag that he had in his right arm that he stretched out towards me and said, "Esa, I have a present for you." But when he was in front of me, he hit with the knife. He had hidden in his outer sleeve to my stomach with full force, completely out of the blue. And he was disturbed and had the idea that Esa is making the impression that he is speaking for human warmth, even love maybe. But I have brilliance that sees through his play act. So given the fact that he's misleading so badly these people that believe that he is speaking of love, he needs to be eliminated. So he was believing he was contributing to mankind by killing me. And this was his stated purpose. It was found out afterwards. But it so happened that the first hit came in such a way that it didn't destroy anything vital. I didn't even notice it happened. I just noticed that something happened. I thought it was some kind of practical joke that he had done because I saw some movement. I seemed to feel that something sort of landed on me. So I thought that he sort of threw something on me. And of course, in that kind of situation, somebody's cognitive stance can be such that you don't, for instance, observe the fact that there is a knife. So cognitively, you're deficient if there in fact is a knife. And it could be that some of your psychological mechanisms are such that you somehow actively contribute to that unthought thought of a knife being around. So you deny the facts. And we know that this, of course, is very, very strong tendency in human beings, that you just somehow maintain a thought that is just plainly against the facts, because you believe into something. You want to believe in so much, in the fact that, let's say, an election was rigged in the United States of America. So you maintain that thought against all facts. It's possible for a human being. In my case, however, regarding the knife, this didn't happen because of the fact that I was there with my long-time trusted assistant, Jaakko Korhonen, who, for instance, made it a point of honor to be present at each of my Aalto University lectures. So no matter what lecture it was, he wanted to be there and check everything goes well. And when he was there, he never did anything else. So I was with Jaakko there, and I heard Jaakko say, after something that I couldn't conceptualize what it was, the line "toise puukko" in Finnish, away with the knife. So I became cognitively aware of the fact that there's a knife from a particular kind of source. And you could say, well, that's beneficial if there in fact is a knife, and in fact the knife is being used against you towards potentially fatal purposes. So as a result of me becoming aware of the fact that there's a knife, when the guy then hit the second time, I was acute enough to use my bag, my briefcase, to cut the line of the knife coming towards me, and there's quite a cut there in the briefcase. After which, because I happened to have gloves on, it was March, but for some reason I had these fairly thick leather gloves, so I managed to grab the knife, plight of blade, holding on to it, and then we fell backwards. Jaakko jumped on the guy, shouting. There were a couple of students further down the line, hey, come to help us to take away the knife. Hei, tulkaa auttamaan ottaa pois tuo puukko. Which is, you could say, a more systems intelligent line than is given the system of human beings. Than, for instance, the line, hey, come to help us. So these two students came to our, and the four of us fought away the knife, and the situation was cut off. But I had in fact been hit in the stomach. So the result was that I was brought to this ambulance. And I remember when these paramedics carried me on the stretcher to the ambulance, I saw this other ambulance. I remember thinking, 2 ambulances, this is great. I was somehow irrationally uplifted of the fact that there were 2 ambulances. It turned out that with this second ambulance, there was just one person in the second ambulance who took control of the situation, took command of the situation. He was somebody whom I later on learned served the function of so-called kenttäjohtaja, field leader, who commanded the overall scene. I met him later on. He told me that one of the things, for instance, he did was that he informed the firemen, 2 of whom you see there in those yellow stripes, but there were 4 of them. And in addition to these 2, those other 2 were there to check where the helicopter would land if needed. But he, as the field commander, saw that the situation doesn't require that. We'll get to Meilahti quicker by land. And then he said to the other one of the paramedics, why don't you follow in my ambulance, because I like to stay here with the patient, although the situation is under control. As we took off from the scene, now this line, I'll stay here with the patient, although the situation is under control, is even today, it sort of touches me, this sort of phenomenon of being by your sideness that I experienced, and in fact had experienced from Jaakko. So you could say, had I not been there with Jaakko, and had Jaakko not been exactly as he was there towards me, I wouldn't be here today because I would be killed. So being by your sideness, you could say, wouldn't that be potentially something that, let's say, a small country can cultivate more easily than a big country. For instance, because of the fact that if you have, let's say, 200 million people in your country, if the country is geographically enormous, it's likely that many of the people that are sort of in principle relevant to you, for instance, because the person might become a president, you'll never meet the guy. There's absolutely no sort of context in which you would happen to have already met the guy, because there are just too many people. So wouldn't it seem that the being by your sideness, as a phenomenon, as a possibility, as a resource amongst people, might be potentially at least a thought to think about in a small country? So you'd say it's a possibility. So it's this kind of thought that to me is part and parcel. I think it's a cornerstone of today's conference. It's the being by your sidedness. And you could say, well, at least that's a possibility that you could have a marriage that after 15 years would start to have more felt, experienced being by your sidedness. For instance, because the spouse would feel that he or she can speak whatever he or she wants to speak about the way he or she wants to speak about something he or she wants to speak about. I mean, it's just sort of, you can start to speak when you want to speak. You could say it's a possibility. That the other one drops whatever, let's say, he or she was reading, even emails, that you sort of drop it and start to listen to your spouse. It's possible. That you take this chance of orienting yourself towards increasing being by your sidedness in the marriage, in the board of directors, in the governing board, whatever it is, your key team. You take it as a sort of point of orientation, is a possible thought. So if we would at the same time believe that there's more to us than meets the eye that is good, you could say, doesn't it seem at least possible that something might emerge that might be quite surprising when you take the time frame as the platform on which to operate? Is at least a possibility. Now, think about this further on with the following sort of observation. When the ambulance left the Tripoli building area, there was this field commander with me in the ambulance. What happened was that the driver put the sirens on. I thought, this is great. I mean, if you think about the option of you being nearly stabbed to death, you leave the scene in an ambulance bleeding, and the sirens wouldn't be on, I think it would be a major drawback in terms of the aesthetics of the overall situation. So I was very excited of the fact that I'm in the ambulance with the sirens on its way to one of the best hospitals in Finland. And of course we know probably in Zurich there are excellent emergency units, let's say in some university hospital, Seoul maybe. But the fact is that if you are in the ambulance right here in Tallinn, on the way the emergency care, I would say you are pretty lucky when you think about where human beings have found themselves up until now, everywhere. So I'm there in the ambulance, basically feeling incredibly lucky. So it came to my mind this thought that how is it possible that I haven't seen that there are so many good people around? Quite clearly, my thinking has often been caught, I thought, by various surface defects. I mean, my experience in many contexts have been that the situation should be different from what it in fact is because of the fact that something has done something that doesn't, from my point of view, contribute to the case as it could contribute to the case. I mean, when you think about all the kinds of positive things there are at your home, let's say you have 3 children, let's say you have 2 children, let's say you have 1 child, maybe you don't have children. But let's assume you have 2 children. So you return home. If you think about that home alone, I mean, when you think about it, it probably is a fairly good home. So in contrast to, let's say, what your grandparents had at your age. I mean, it's not to blame anybody. It's just sort of acknowledge the fact that, probably quite a few things are pretty well there at your home, but when you arrive home, it's highly likely that your experience is one you feel the lack of something because some people are not contributing to the overall good the way they easily could if they just chose to, but they don't choose. And why don't they choose to contribute to the overall good? That's because they are the way they are. For good. I mean, any manager can think about ways in which his or her team could contribute so easily to the overall good. But they just don't contribute. And why is that? Well, because it's not like in the old days. I mean, you don't have the kind of loyalty like in the old days. I mean, you don't see the same kind of devotion, the same kind of passion to make a difference like in the old days. So you have your rational explanations why people don't contribute what they so easily could contribute. More easily than you see what you could contribute from their point of view that wouldn't be anything away from you. But you just don't contribute. I mean, couldn't he at least stop for a moment and ask, how are things with me? I mean, I just saw him there at the corridor, and he was just rushing there. I mean, couldn't he even start the meeting by first acknowledging what Märt's team had done, because it was so outstanding, what they had done, but instead he just went to the agenda. I mean, it would have taken 10 seconds for him or her to say that, before we go to the agenda, let me just acknowledge what Märt's team did with Kesko or whatever was so outstanding. I mean, as we know, it didn't really yield what we wanted it to yield, but what Märt and his team did was just absolutely outstanding. So thank you. I know everybody in this room shares me in saying, Märt, thank you once again. I mean, he didn't do it. So it's this case of surface defect that is interesting, because if you think about the case, the life, the situations of your grandparents at your age, and ask, well, objectively speaking, could it be that some of the defects that you experience are only surface defects when you place them in context? Brings this unthought thought of placing the something in context in full sight. I mean, we need to, with our thinking, bring the context to light to indicate that many of the defects that we feel, that we experience, in fact, are only surface defects. But this is something that takes place entirely within you. Just like you could say the decisive moment at our place on Boulevard, that evening when my mother was dead the last time, as it turned out later on, the battle took place entirely within me. So it's this kind of thinking of one's thinking, not from the point of view of claiming that you can do anything. It's just to acknowledge that surely you can think something better than you now currently do, but the challenge is most of the time you don't really reflect using that, you could say, miraculous muscle because of the fact that you need to think other things all the time. This is the black hole of tasks that sucks you in, that forms this field of gravitation, that also holds on its embrace of you in the free time. Because in the free time also there are all kinds of tasks you need to do, not only in terms of getting something done, but also in terms of sort of reacting to something that you somehow instinctively feel that you need to react to it, so some beep. And you generate habits, which habits then also push you further away from the broader reflection, which you could at any time do, but you don't de facto do. Now, think about this case from the point of view of the following. This is an image, every now and then I look at this very image because, I love Pipsa so much. I've gotten so much also professionally from her. And she's such an incredible human being in her ability to care, for instance. So just this morning I remembered in the hotel this first trip we did together to Lisbon years back, when I was very excited to be in Lisbon. So I said to Pipsa, hey, let's go out, check out Lisbon. She said, okay, let's go to check out Lisbon. But before doing that, let's clean the room. I said, what do you mean, clean the room? This is hotel room. There are special cleaners for the hotel room, aren't there? Finnair Pipsa used to work for Finnair. So Pipsa Finnair used a very good hotel. So it's a great hotel in Lisbon. Surely they have cleaners for this room. So Pipsa said, yeah, they have cleaners here, but the point here is to clean for the cleaners. It's a possible thought to clean for the cleaners. Siivota siivoille in Finnish. Even rhythmically, it's a great tune. So, hey Jude, it's immediately sort of catches you. So she has this ability to sort of think about that person that comes to clean the room. And it's a possible perspective. Where are the shoes? Are there socks lying around? That would be so easy for the person who has dropped the sock there to put the sock, let's say, to the shoe in which it was brought to that hotel room. It's so that when the person comes that is going to clean the room, he or she, in most cases it's a she, would feel differently of life in that locality as a result of you doing, let's say, 30 seconds of cleaning for the cleaners. So this is Pipsa kind of thinking. In a sense, you could say it's sort of a plus button thinking from the point of view of this case, the cleaners. But this, of course, means in many contexts, this her sort of tendency to think in terms of other people. That her husband is irritated de facto because her husband has, let's say, 1,000 people coming up in Finlandia Hall. So you could say, understandably, Esa wants to concentrate. 3 hours before, he doesn't want to start to think about all kinds of other people that don't have anything to do with the upcoming lecture. I mean, most of the time I'm preoccupied by all kinds of things regarding which it's a intrusion, it's a distraction to think about, let's say, godchildren, or to think somebody's situation whom we just met at the door. So caring brings in potential tasks, potential behaviors that are discrepancies most of the time from the point of view of my work. But most of the time I want to think about my work. So this means that very often there are these sort of everyday tensions. Also because the way Pipsa brings these various things up to me is at least sometimes irritating. Because they come out of the blue from so many directions. So in this context, I find consolation in this screenshot from a documentary of the Rolling Stones. So a documentary of the Rolling Stones, this is a few years back. So the Rolling Stones, after 60 years, are performing in South America. And it's Keith there commenting on their relationship with Mick, saying that, well, as has been documented well, and people know that every now and then, Mick and I, we have our clashes. And I mean, there are such different personalities to start with. I mean, we have our clashes, but then Keith continues. Also, we know we've been given this amazing gift between us. Notice this way of expressing the point, this amazing gift between us. I mean, it's sort of understandable that somebody looks at something that stands out as a separate entity. So you have somebody in your team. It's understandable that you form your thoughts on the basis of that separate entity, as opposed to the in-between of you and this other person. But because you don't de facto form your thoughts primarily on the basis of the in-between, you don't also recognize the gift of the in-between. But surely you could at least, let's say, in a marriage context, to think about that you have actually a gift in between. But the in-between depends on you as much as it depends on the other one. But you, at the same time, influence the other one. So it's this kind of dyadic, bidirectional, strange influence system, which most of the time, in most organizational units, be it those macro style, be it those smaller, whether it's your company, it's your board of directors, whether it's your marriage, it's you with respect to your aging parents, most of the time you don't see the gift of the in-between. I think the idea of this conference is the Estonian gift of in-between. But in order for you to think about it, I think it's good at least to have a name for it. Because that then maybe helps you to put the whole thing not only in context, but within the context in which, in fact, the gift of the Estonian in-between of this conference takes place, which is the building up of the Estonian society that you love. I mean, for one thing, it's possible for somebody to love something. So that's one point. Second point is that, well, you could have something that you love in mind as a kind of, you could say, upscale register. Now, the upscale register typically don't come towards us except in fairly trivial forms of the kind that you have a target of 120, whereas the current reality is 97. You can say this is upscale in the sense that it's up from where we are now in the realm of something that can be counted within Excels. But surely life is more than that, because life, in fact, can have the kind of upscale register context thought-wise. It's just that it could be that it's an unthought thought as far as you're concerned, de facto. Even in the case of, let's say, your most intimate relationships. So to upscale register perspective in mind, think about the following. I think it was in 97 that I was in Estonia, and there was a big article on me. And then it was obviously in Estonian, so I wanted to learn what's in it. And so I contacted Esko Ollila, a former minister and cousin of Pipsas, whom I knew Estonian language. And not only Estonian language, it was at Esko's summer place, to which regularly Lennart Meri came to spend summer weeks. So he was a very good friend of Lennart Meri, this cousin of Pipsas Esko Ollila. So I contacted Esko Ollila regarding what's in this article. And then when I would have presentations here in Finland, here in Estonia, I would ask him regarding what are some of your impressions of Lennart Meri. And he said, well, I remember, for instance, when Lennart came to Finland as the newly elected president of the newly independent Republic of Estonia. So Lennart came for an official visit as the president. And I was present when he went to pay his respect for the grave of Marsa Mannerheim, which is something that you could say for us Finns, I mean, we are not that religious in a sense, but if there's a sacred place, this is among the sacred places. So there's this burial site that has this huge stone, and you place this thing, and you stand there for a moment. But in that funeral site, there are also ordinary stones, hundreds of them. Because the marshal that led the Finnish army is surrounded by his soldiers. So hundreds and hundreds of stones of ordinary soldiers that fell in the Finnish independence fight against Stalin's aggression. So Lennart Meri is there paying homage to Mannerheim, and Esko continues, when he had done that, quite astonishingly, he stepped aside the protocol. So what happened was that to everybody's surprise, he all of a sudden started to move and walked to amongst those ordinary graves and then stopped at one of them. This was the grave of an Estonian volunteer. That had given his life to Finland. You could say, well, that's a possible thought to appreciate. You could say as a category. I mean, you can think in upscale terms. You can think about the theme of being by your sidedness in context of something that you think in terms of the upscale. I mean, there are all kinds of functional movements forward that I could imagine that some of the people gathered in this conference might make, let's say, over the afternoon coffee break. So you just meet somebody and you bring something up that you see the person. Hey, could we look more closely into X or Y? And you could say, when you speak about the small community, there are all kinds of things you don't have to sort of check in advance. So the case is different from what might be, let's say, in the UK or in Germany. So I mean, there's so much you sort of also instinctively feel of the person already. And it could be that your children go to the same, let's say, kindergarten. So there's a lot of you have in common, in fact. But what you have most in common is the fate of Estonia. So you could say it's great if you can sort of exchange benefits. But it's more if those exchanging of the benefits would take place in a larger context of doing something meaningful together. So that's the situation where maybe the following kind of concluding point would step in place. I mean, if you think about the fact that some things, some events, some behaviors, some contributions might be beneficial from the point of view of, let's say, an achievement being done. But it could also be that at the same time, something bigger happens. It could be that you have a trainee in your organization that you happen to meet there at the lobby. And you see that the person is a trainee, you just sort of stop for, let's say, a couple of minutes. And you ask this person something, where do you come from? How do you like it here? I mean, just a few sort of maybe questions that indicate your faith in future. That it's young people like you who are going to take the torch. So it's great that I see that sparkle in your eye. I've been young myself once. I know what it means when a senior person just starts to talk to you. And it's something where I think the key challenge is this tendency of ours, this sort of gravitation towards the tasks list, which I think destroy life at the deeper level. But it doesn't take away the fact that we could think that thought of a deeper level. if we just choose to do so. And I hope that our 1 hour here together would have been a context where you could have maybe done that to the benefit of your life and your organization and to Estonia. So I see that there are 50 seconds left. So maybe I would stop there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
This is this no more to say feeling. I still do have a question for you. Thank you so much for sharing all those powerful stories with us. And with all those stories, as you said, there is unthought, there is untold, there is unfelt. And sometimes I believe with the things you told us today, it's not like we realized what they were about now, but we take them with us. And it comes actually later. What was the meaning? What was actually to take from all of that? It was very touching, actually, how you were thinking and talking about your mother. Everyone in here could see how it affected you. It was really full of warmth. And what we were actually talking about is the most important thing of humankind. What is that we're actually searching for? What is that we're actually craving for? The story was about love. It wasn't about sauna. Of course, that was a form to express something. But what is, at least that was how I felt, it was about love. And what is the humankind actually searching for in this life? This is what we are searching for, even unthought, untold, unexpressed. And often we go around and like searching for it. But there is no skill, or we can't really switch it around from searching for it to creating, contributing. So from your experience, fully theoretical, lots of practical, how is that? What is your, let's say, advice? How do we switch from searching to creating love, creating this meaningfulness for ourselves?
Okay, thank you for that question. Let me answer to that sort of slightly strangely. I mean, one of the things that struck me this morning as I came to this space was something that happened just maybe a month ago. I was in the restaurant Cosmos, and I was there with rally driver Ari Vatanen. Restaurant Cosmos has just turned 100 years, and it's a family-owned great restaurant. But Sakari Kuosmanen, performer, actor, is often in Aki Kaurismäki's films, was there, and I introduced Saku to Ari, telling that because I had been reading Saku's biography of him being in Estonia before independence for a rock festival. And you could say, well, of course, he's a rock musician, so you could say his tendency is to do things, you could say, potentially outrageously, stepping aside a given choreography. But him, they're announcing the fact that Estonia should be independent was quite, I mean, you could say courageous and so forth, but he said that I don't think I've ever had an audience like I had then. So I was thinking of this feeling that a musician can have the country of the singing revolution, and of the fact that it's sort of like Georg Saaremäen Valsi theme, the fact that, of course, we could think about our thinking more in terms of music, because that would maybe open us to that in-between, which is natural for musicians to turn to. I mean, the case of the musical score is secondary. They like to start to immediately take benefit of the fact that it's the somebody who is there with whom you start to do it. I think it's the kind of instinctual turning towards something that we don't primarily grasp conceptually, but carries meaning, music. And here I think that you have a culturally strength, because it's connectivity to that phenomenon that we conceptually try to refer to with the word love, which of course ultimately is sort of clumsy, because it's so obvious it doesn't really capture the phenomenon itself. So in the Finnish language, I often in my lectures prefer to use the expression rakkaudellinen, you say lovingly. And the word in the Finnish language, rakkaudellinen, to me is one that I feel, as it were, as a musician, that when I see the score, I get, okay, it's a complicated score, I might believe in myself in terms of my virtuosity. But it could be too much, sometimes this is the case. So for me, the theme of love per se was one that I thought that I can't do justice to the theme. But then I thought that, well, I can do justice to the theme of rakkaudellinen, that at least something is doing lovingly. So I guess as I said, this is a little bit sort of strange answer. Yeah, but it's I think it's very important that we don't, as it were, turn too much to our conceptual muscles, but instead see that our conceptual muscles are just part of the overall whatever we are. And it's the overall whatever we are, I think that it's useful to approach with thoughts. But as we approach it with thoughts, I don't think we should rectify to something into something that is as well an object, but rather something that gets our movement, just like in music, people are trying to, or find kind of natural to do.
Thank you. We'll take the steps, the little ones, if the big ones are too big. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We have time for at least one, if there is one. If not at the moment, then I will ask everyone to give you one more warm applause, and we're really very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Tulemme.